So, my name is Amanda McGrory. I am a four-time Paralympian in track and field. That's the hardest part of any sort of adaptive sport, I think, is that the equipment is all custom and it is so expensive. I think that it's super traumatic no matter what. It's a major life change, and there is nothing you can do to prepare yourself for something like that to happen. But I want to see more people with disabilities, more members of the disability community being a part of television shows and
Welcome to the Wheel With It podcast with your host, Devon. Let's get into the episode.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. I am your host, Devon Wieters, and today we have Amanda McGrory on the podcast. She's a Paralympian. She's a disability advocate. She helps out a lot with all kinds of adaptive sports things. And so this was a great conversation about disability, adaptive sports, the Paralympics, everything, and I think you guys are really gonna love her. Here's my conversation with Amanda McGrory. Hello, welcome to another episode of Wheel With It, and today I am here with Amanda McGrory. She is so nice. We've been talking for a while before we started recording. Hi, Amanda. How are you today?
I am great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excited that you are here. First of all, tell us about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
So, my name is Amanda McGrory. I am a four-time Paralympian in track and field. I started competing when I was 11 years old. I found out about the Paralympic Games through a newspaper article in 1996 when I was 10, and then started shortly after, got involved in wheelchair racing and wheelchair basketball, and played both sports all the way through high school into college. Went to my first Paralympic Games in 2008 in Beijing, and then continued training through 2020 for Tokyo. Around that time, when the games were being delayed due to COVID, I was called by the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and recruited for the archivist position. And so when I should have been on my way to Tokyo for my fourth Paralympics, I was actually moving from Illinois to Colorado to start my big girl job as an archivist for Team USA, and then continued training and officially retired shortly after the Tokyo Games, but have managed to stay involved through working for Team USA, volunteering for different sports organizations, and most recently getting involved in the broadcast side. And I was actually in Connecticut with NBC Sports covering track and field for the Paris 2024 Paralympics.
That is how I found out about you, as I was watching Olympic trials, because we'll get into this. I saw Noelle and Ryan on Survivor, and that got me interested in it. So I was watching and saw you and reached out, and you're here. So
that's awesome. I didn't know that's how you found me.
Yeah. Tell us, if you don't mind, as much as you're comfortable, tell us how you became.
Yeah. So I have a rare neuroimmune disorder called transverse myelitis. It's a demyelinating disorder similar to what you would find with something like multiple sclerosis, but it happens in the spine and it's generally a single attack. And the results are varying levels of paralysis. And so I am similar to a spinal cord injury, have a low level paraplegia, and that happened when I was 5. So it's one of those crazy things that there's not really all that much known about it because it's so rare. It's one of those 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 million people are affected by it. And I more or less just woke up in the morning and my legs felt weak. I went downstairs and then shortly after was unable to stand. My parents took me to the emergency room and it was weeks of testing at different hospitals before I ended up with a diagnosis.
So how long did it take you to get diagnosed?
It was about from my intake in the emergency room until I had a formal diagnosis. It was about 2 weeks. And that was after days and days of MRIs and spinal taps and CAT scans, trying to figure out what was going on because there was really no known cause at the time. And even when I was given the diagnosis, it was we don't really know what else this could possibly be. So we're going to go with this. One of the hallmarks of the disorder is that you can see inflammation in the spinal cord, usually where the attack happens, where the paralysis begins. And all of my scans came back clean. And so it was really difficult to come up with a concrete diagnosis.
Yeah, that must have been super. Because I had to go to the emergency room twice with some vertigo because honestly, people laugh when I say this, but I get Botox shots for my muscles. And
Mhm.
that night we had gone to a wine tasting. So when I woke up and started throwing up, as soon as I sat up, we were like, oh, Botox and wine, stupid us. Like, this is what you get. But then it kept going and going. And so we had to go to the emergency room a second time, and then they did like liver and that was terrifying, and it was just vertigo, I think.
Yeah, it's
So
hard to find the root cause sometimes.
it was terrifying, and that was just vertigo. I can't even imagine how like terrifying that was for you and your parents.
It was probably scarier for my parents, to be honest, because I was so young, I didn't truly understand what was going on until later. But it was scary for me after a few weeks because transverse myelitis is really rare, and we know more about it now than we did in the early 90s, but no one could really explain what had happened or why. And that's scary for a 5-year-old. That I had just woken up one day the same as I had the day before and the day before that, but suddenly I couldn't walk. And so, what was going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year? Was this something that could happen again? And just getting used to the idea that my life was different and things had changed was really, that part was hard for me.
At least you got disabled pretty early and not in your teens, because I think in your teens it would be harder than your young days, but it's hard anytime, but at least you were younger, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's super traumatic no matter what. It's a major life change, and there is nothing you can do to prepare yourself for something like that to happen. But kids are pretty resilient, they're pretty elastic, they bounce back quickly. And I think a lot of that is just because you are young and you don't know anything else. And I hear a lot from individuals who acquired their disabilities later that the transition is really difficult because they've lived a whole life 20, 30, 40 years as one person. And then everything changes. Their hobbies change, their homes change, their lives change, their work changes sometimes. And figuring out who you are after something like that can be really difficult. But as a kid, you don't really know who you are yet anyway.
Yeah. How did you get into parasport? You told us about the newspaper article, but beyond that, like, what was the journey like for you?
So when I was finishing up my spinal cord injury rehab, I went to a hospital in Wilmington, Delaware, which is now the New Morris Foundation. And so I did all of my rehab there, and they used to sponsor a wheelchair racing team and a track meet. And so I went to my first wheelchair race when I was 5 years old. Didn't have any of the equipment, just used my everyday wheelchair, didn't have gloves, didn't have a helmet, didn't have anything. And I loved it. But unfortunately, the following year, they had lost funding for that event. And as a result, in the pre internet days, it was really difficult to find anything else. And my mom asked around, was trying to find other opportunities for me to be involved in sport because I was a super active kid and I loved it. And she wanted to encourage me to continue being fit and healthy and active because those are just good skills and good habits to have as you get older. And so it wasn't until about 1997 or so, I had gone to a sleepaway camp for kids with physical disabilities. And after the camp, the city of Philadelphia had reached out and to some of the kids and some of the families that had gone to camp and said that they were interested in putting together an adaptive sports program and wondered if I would be interested in participating. And we only lived about an hour from Philadelphia. And my parents said, absolutely sure, let's try. And that was my first taste of organized adaptive sports, playing wheelchair basketball, and then also getting involved in their wheelchair racing team.
Tell us what the lead up and the training for the Paralympics was like.
So in 2004, when I graduated from high school, I accepted an adaptive sports scholarship to the University of Illinois, actually to be a member of their wheelchair basketball team. And I had always wanted to be a wheelchair racer. I found out about Paralympic wheelchair racing when I was a kid. My mom clipped a newspaper article for me from the Atlanta 96 Paralympic Games about Leanne Shannon, who was 14 years old at the time and had won gold in the 100-meter and broke a world record. And that was my like, yes, this is cool. This is something I want to do. As I was going through high school, getting older, I wasn't having the success that I had hoped for in wheelchair racing, but was getting more and more attention from coaches and from international teams for wheelchair basketball. So decided that maybe I would switch things up and focus more on that. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of college that I was bribed, basically, by my coach and one of his friends to do my very first marathon, which I finished third, and decided I was never going to do another marathon again. But that
Yes,
was
I'm like, I am not I don't know how these people do it. I struggle getting down my sidewalk at this point. No.
So the thing is, I said I was never going to do another marathon, but at this point, I've done over 100 of them.
I guess you fall in love with it, but for me now, I'm like, oh no, I'm not a distance runner. A 5K would be an accomplishment. But
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I didn't think that I was either, which is why I was so resistant to try it. But my coach had thought that maybe the problems I was having with wheelchair racing was because I wasn't doing the right distances. And I thought that I wanted to be a 400-meter, 800-meter middle distance athlete, when it turns out that I was really meant to be a much, much longer distance athlete. And so after that first marathon, I'd finally figured out where I fit. And then things started happening really quickly. I qualified for my first national team. I went to world championships. I broke a world record in the 5K, and then ended up going to Beijing in 2008 as a member of the Paralympic track and field team.
That is incredible. Tell us what Paralympic Games is like, the atmosphere and stuff.
Oh my goodness. It's so hard to describe because it's unlike anything else. There is just an excitement and an energy. And all of the people that I have talked to, especially on the US team, have said similarly that they feel an instant bond with people who are there competing at the games, not only because they are the best athletes in the world at their particular sport, but also because they have this instant kind of shared connection of also being members of the disability community. So it's this, even if you don't speak the same language, if you've had different life experiences, you have this like instant double connection of, I do this sport and I'm really good at it. And also I experience the world as a member of the disability community. And it just makes this very cool, very collaborative, competitive, but also unique environment for sure.
Tell us about how the Paralympics works and all the classifications, because those confuse me so much. Because track and field, it's the higher the number, the greater the impairment is. Everything else is the lower the number, the greater the impairment is.
So track and field gets a little bit complicated because unlike most other sports where you're just given a number and the number refers to the severity of your impairment, in track and field you get two numbers. And track and field is the only sport within the Paralympic system that is divided out into categories of disability and then severity of disability. And so each of the tens digits refers to a different category of disability, whether it's visual impairment, intellectual impairment, cerebral palsy, neurological disabilities, wheelchair users, limb differences and amputations. And so that is the first number. And then within that, then we move on to the lower the number, the more severe the impairment. And so if you think about the tens are visual impaired athletes. Okay. So T11 athletes will be completely blind. They run with a blindfold, they run with a guide. 12 athletes still have significant visual impairments, but they do not run with the blindfold, and they have the option to run independently or with a guide if they choose. Teens, the least severe of athletes with visual impairments, do not have an option for a guide and do not get any other accommodations on the track. And so it goes up that way throughout all of the different categories.
So then, okay, Ryan was in the 30s. Noelle was in the third. So people in wheelchairs are in like the 4s and 5s, right?
Visual impairments are the 10s. Intellectual impairments are the 20s. Athletes with cerebral palsy are 30s. Athletes with limb differences who do not run with a lower limb prosthetic are 40s. Athletes who compete seated in a wheelchair, throwing or wheelchair racing, and then athletes who run with a lower leg prosthetic, either a below knee or above knee, one prosthetic or two, are in the 60s.
Okay,
so Noelle competes in the 60s, and I believe she's a
63.
Three. So that is 63 is one leg with an above the knee prosthetic running blade. And then for Ryan Medrano in the 30s, 38 is the highest category of athletes with cerebral palsy. 32s, 33s, 34s would compete seated or using a racing chair. And then 35 through 38 compete ambulatory, Ryan being the least impaired as a 38.
Yeah. I would be probably, and if I were a track and field athlete, I would probably be in like the 50s.
So because the 30s are really interesting because it's the only category within track and field that has athletes that are both seated and ambulatory. And since you have cerebral palsy, you would automatically be in the 30s, and you would likely be a 33 or a 34.
Okay.
I compete as a 54, and sometimes 34s and 54s they don't compete against each other. They compete with each other because they're both wheelchair racing athletes.
Okay, all right. So 54 is like more spinal, and then okay, yeah, that was the only confusing thing. I was like, okay, I trust them to get it right. It was like what like an average day of like training for you.
My goodness. So when I was training full time, and I was doing marathon training, so that is a lot of miles. Professional marathoner for 6 years in between my bachelor's degree and then going back to school to get my master's because I figured I needed a real job at some point. But I would train 6 days a week, and we would train 10 sessions per week. And so usually 8 of those sessions were on the track or on the road in our racing chairs, and 2 of them were strength sessions. And we would usually start in the mornings with something that was a little bit more speed based. So an hour or two probably of training each morning and doing a lot of sprints, they're called fartleks in distance racing, and that's speed changes. And so we would do things on paces. So meters slow, 400 meters medium, 400 meters fast, and different things like that to get used to holding different sorts of speeds. And then oftentimes our afternoon sessions would be either lifting in the gym. We did a lot of body lifts, so a lot of med ball work, a lot of push-ups, pull-ups, those sorts of things, or just a long, steady recovery push that would be 10 to 13 miles. And then every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., we would go out and do 20 miles plus, and that would be our long workout of the week.
See, that is why I will never do, I think I will never do a marathon, never say never, because the minute you say 20 miles, oh gosh, I cannot.
We would end up over 100 miles for the full week.
That is crazy. Like I can do it, and I think I could in like little chunks, but 20 miles, no. In a day, like I am not a runner. So
it's anything else. So you 100% have to work your way up to being at that point, especially because the racing chairs are really uncomfortable.
They are uncomfortable. Okay. Yeah. I was wondering because I've never been in one. I've only seen them for I think I've only seen them like once or twice. I always wondered how it felt to sit in that thing. And I have a manual chair that I like work out in. And how is it different from the regular manual chair?
So the racing chairs are built for speed and efficiency and not at all for comfort. And most athletes there are a few exceptions to this, and sometimes it's actually athletes within the 33s and 34s because they have some spasticity from their cerebral palsy. It makes it really difficult to sit scrunched up in the same way that the 50s athletes do.
That would be impossible for me. Like it's really impossible.
Yeah, it requires a lot of flexibility. But most athletes sit tucked up on their knees. And so they sit on their heels, and then their chest comes down to their knees. And then you strap in that position as tight as you can go.
Oh, that sounds like uncomfortable, crazy. Like I would definitely not be able to do that. I would definitely have to find another way to do it because my muscles would just be like, no, like honestly.
When I was in college, I was coaching a friend of mine who has cerebral palsy and competed as a T33. And when she first got started, one of the things that was most important for her was just to be able to get used to sitting in her racing chair. And her workouts were to just sit and watch TV in that position.
Yes, that would be me. That would be my workout. And I would be like, when is this going to be over? Because this is pure torture.
So that was it. She had her racing chair set up in front of the TV and started with 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes, just to get used to being in that position.
So do you have to sit like that if you're not in a certain classification, or is that just like the most like efficient position? Okay.
Yeah, there's no requirement. It's the most aerodynamic position. So for athletes who do marathons, you see almost all of them sitting in that position, or the longer distance races, just because the longer the race goes, the more important it is that you are being as efficient and aerodynamic as you possibly can. But for shorter distance races, it's more common to see athletes sit with their feet down in front of them. So similarly to how you would sit in an everyday chair, and then you would just lean over and put your chest as close as you could to your knee, but without having your feet up underneath of you. A little bit more comfortable, not a lot more comfortable, but a little bit.
Yeah, at least like it wouldn't be comfortable, but it wouldn't be torturous either, because the minute I sat with my legs like up behind me like that, it would pull on my hips because I'm so tight. And honestly, I could not stand that level of pain. I tried it, and I could not. We could not even do half kneels because my hips and my knees hurt so bad.
Yeah,
because this would pull, and then that would cause that immense pain, and that. So I would not be able to. I don't think.
there's a couple different versions too, and there's also some kind of like hybrid racing chair everyday manual wheelchairs that a lot of people use if they just wanted to not necessarily be serious about sport, but just start getting a little bit more active and maybe do a 1 mile fun run or a 5K or something like that.
Yeah, so my first goal is a 5K. So I haven't been able to run, quote unquote, as consistently as I would like because of what I've been dealing with the past 6 weeks. But honestly, I think we're over that, or starting to get over that now. Yeah, I think I should be able to get back to it.
Are you planning on doing it in your day chair?
Yeah, because I'm in this power chair primarily. So I'm doing it in my manual chair for everyday manual chair for now.
Very cool.
And then my parents, when you can get around the block at a good pace, we'll talk about a racing chair. And so I'm like, okay, because I know those racing chairs are incredibly expensive, like incredibly.
That's the hardest part of any sort of adaptive sport, I think, is that the equipment is all custom and it is so expensive.
I heard the price. You say the prices, and I'm like, really? That for a chair? I know it's specialized stuff isn't free, but I was like, that sounds like way too much to me. Honestly, I'm sorry.
They're all handmade, custom to order, which is a big part of why they cost so much, because there's no good way to mass produce adaptive equipment like that. You can mass produce a bike, like a standard 2-wheel bicycle, and those are pretty easy, and you can make little adjustments. But everything, when you're talking about wheelchair sports or adaptive sports, is 100% custom to the app, and that's a big part of what drives that cost up.
So, are you familiar with the So Everybody Can Move Foundation?
I'm not.
You need to look it up because they are fighting to get insurance to cover running blades and I think sports wheelchairs as well. But I know at least the running blades because they're like, this is ridiculous that you want to cover a running blade for a kid. That's part of the whole development for a kid is to be able to run and play. And it's ridiculous that there's not more help.
That would be amazing. And it's something that's always been frustrating to me throughout my whole life, that none of those specialized like pieces of sports equipment are covered by insurance. It just feels like our system is very outdated, especially because all of those things help build healthy habits and make you more healthy as you start aging.
Yeah.
Which would save money in the long run.
Yeah, you would save money in the long run from like aging costs because they would be healthier. So it's either spend it now or spend it when they're like 70. Were you on the Medicaid waivers at any point? Did you?
I have not been.
Okay, good. Don't ever go on them because I'm on the Medicaid waiver right now and those things are set up so awful. Oh my gosh.
I think that's one of the hard things too. There's programs that help people get access to equipment and care that they need, but sometimes there is so much paperwork and it's so difficult to do that it turns people away or makes them feel like it's not worth it.
Yes, it's not even feels like it's not even worth me being on it because you can't hire aid because they only pay them $13 an hour. You can't make over X amount of money or you don't qualify. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm like, basically, you want me to sit here with no aid, no job, and no life, basically. And then you give me all the services I want. But the minute I start to have a life, you take it.
I understand why the system exists, but it's something else that I think really needs to be updated because it doesn't help people become more independent. It doesn't help people start to build their savings or get jobs or do any of those things because you get punished for that.
Like, my friend literally cannot tell anybody. She works a full-time job. She's on the waiver, and she literally cannot tell anybody that she has 401k because they might consider that an asset and say she's disqualified. I'm like, it's
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good system. It definitely needs to be updated and improved. I agree.
so I literally have a legit survey of like how can we improve the waivers, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where to send it out to. Maybe I can contact like one of those resources you gave me and said, hey, if you have anybody that would be interested in taking this.
Yeah. I that is an area I'm very familiar in the sports world, but that is an area that I'm a little bit less familiar with and have fewer contacts.
So I'm literally considering going back to school to get a master's in social work just so I can know these waivers inside and out and help people because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is really ridiculous. But
That would be amazing. And I think that the world needs more people and more social workers who have been through these programs and understand the way that they work, as well as the ways that they need to be improved or could be updated. And that's what's going to make them better.
yes, after that little tangent, how would you like to see what improvements would you like to see in the disability community as far as accessibility and stuff goes?
I think the biggest thing is always exposure. And we've made great strides when it comes to exposure of Paralympic Games. Television coverage and viewership was up over 100% over the Tokyo Paralympic Games, which
Yes,
is massive.
I saw 15.4 billion. Like Chuck Aoki is hilarious, by the way. He's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah,
And
there's so many great personalities too within the Paralympic movement.
I've been watching his Instagram reels and TikToks, and I saw 15.4 million. I was like,
Yeah, I love them. Ezra Freck has a ton of followers. Hunter Woodall and Tara Davis Woodall have a ton of followers. And I think that all of that is doing great things for increased awareness around adaptive sports. But I still think we have a long way to go when we're talking about recognition for athletes, but beyond like outside of the sports world entirely. I just want to see more people with disabilities, more members of the disability community being a part of television shows and game shows. We were talking about Survivor and how cool it was to see Noelle Lambert and Ryan Medrano on the show, just there, members of the disability community participating in the show and getting more exposure. There's a huge population of disabled individuals within the United States, and the majority of them don't get any recognition and then aren't seen. And the only time anyone with a disability is seen on television or getting media coverage is when they are doing something considered to be exceptional.
yes. And part of that is like part of some of the stuff they do is exceptional and able-bodied human being, and I don't mind that. But like when it's like them just like going to the grocery store, or going out to a bar, or like getting a tattoo, I'm like, if you
Right.
think getting a tattoo is exceptional, then you should see the people in the disability community because we are just like tatted to the like I have one tattoo, but I've seen people with disabilities that have tons of tattoos. So that is not that exceptional.
No,
So
it is not. It's not newsworthy. And I think that's the hardest thing. And there's so many stories. And I know that you know this too, but especially in the sports world, we talk so much about the inspirational narrative. And it's cool. You can be inspired by people who are doing things that are, starting foundations, winning gold medals, getting PhDs and public speaking and doing things that are just generally very cool. But you are right. Going to the grocery store, getting gas, going to get a tattoo, none of that is.
yeah, none of that is absolutely remarkable. And I appreciate it when people compliment the podcast and stuff because I'm like, okay, at least I'm doing something. But when people come up to me at a craft show and I'm just looking at crafts like everybody else and they're like, God bless you. I'm like, okay, all right.
I know. And I think it's so hard because I never know how to respond in those situations.
Yeah, I once had a lady like, and this is a huge issue in the disability community too. It's like personal space goes out the window and then just feel free to invade it.
Yes.
If you did that to an able bodied person, that would be creepy. And it's still creepy when you do it to a disabled person. So please stop doing that.
For sure, the
Yeah.
rules should not be different.
I had the lady come up and kiss me on the head and say, God bless you. And I'm like, and my dad was like, we do this in the South, and that's like a common greeting. I'm like, I didn't see her do that to anybody else. That's an issue.
But I think that more exposure and normalizing disability is what is going to help that. And having members of the disability community on reality shows, hiring disabled actors, giving people with disabilities opportunities to use their voices and their platforms by hosting podcasts or being correspondents and doing coverage on the news or commentary for sports. All of that is slowly helping change that narrative that you can be disabled and be successful.
Yeah. So what's like both the most positive thing you've gotten and like the craziest thing that's been said to you?
So I volunteer every summer at Move United Nationals, which is where I got my start competing as a kid, my first national competitions. And I go back every year just because I think that it is important for all of the kids who are there competing and even the parents too, to get the opportunities to see disability represented in different ways. In this past year that I was there, I had more than one of the kids who were coming in to compete. I was working registration, so I'm the first person that they see, tell me that they had seen me on TV or had heard me do marathon coverage and that they wanted to be sportscasters. And I think that is the coolest thing because there aren't a lot of people who have done it this far, and to be able to be one of the first and show people what's possible is big. So that's always the biggest compliment that I get. Craziest thing is probably the same as what you were just talking about. I get a lot of people who want to pray for me.
Yeah,
or
like, can
bless
I
me.
pray for your healing? Like, that's the biggest thing I got going on. But okay. And I know that they're trying to be like well meaning, but don't assume that's like the biggest
No,
thing.
and it's a reflection of the ableism in our community that everyone thinks that your life must be so sad and so difficult and so terrible because you have a disability, and they could never imagine their lives being like that. So they want to pray for you to get better so that you can live the life that they think you should.
And that's I've only had it happen to me like maybe once or twice, but in the South, like in the deep South, that's a huge issue because that's like Bible Belt. And I'm like, if I lived in the real Bible Belt, like I thank God I don't live there because I could not imagine. Have you read that book, My Body Is Not a Prayer Request? I haven't either, but I've heard great things about it. It's written by this disability theologian, and she is disabled, and it's just about that exact thing, like people thinking like that they have to pray for you to get better and stuff. And so it's called My Body Is Not a Prayer Request. So
Yeah.
that's
I'm
a
gonna
read.
check it out.
Maybe you and I will read it together because I've heard nothing but good things about it.
I love it.
Anything else that you would like to add before we get off here?
No, I think that is pretty much it. This was a lot of fun, and thanks so much for reaching out. We should definitely stay in touch. Maybe we can start a book club.
Yes, we will definitely stay in touch. Thank you. We will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I really love that conversation. She was really nice, really cool to talk to. Be sure to follow her on social media. We'll put the links in the show notes. And we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to follow the show and our guests on social media and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you'll get notified when we upload new episodes. See you next time.